The train wheezed to a stop in the bitter January wind, and Cordelia Ashworth clutched her worn carpetbag with hands that shook from more than cold. Snow swirled around the depot platform where a handful of men stood waiting, their eyes sharp as winter hawks scanning for prey. She was the only woman stepping down from the passenger car, which meant every one of them knew exactly why she had come to Millbrook territory. Mail-order bride. The words burned in her chest like swallowed shame. 3 months ago she had been Miss Ashworth of Boston, teaching children their letters and living respectably in her aunt's boarding house. Now she was merchandise, purchased sight unseen by a stranger who promised shelter in exchange for housekeeping and whatever else a man expected from a woman desperate enough to answer such advertisements. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button because what happens next will blow your mind. The conductor helped her down the metal steps, his grip firm on her elbow as her boots touched the snow-packed platform. Her breath formed white clouds in the frigid air as she searched the faces of the waiting men, wondering which one held the letter that had brought her here. A tall man with silver threading his beard stepped forward, his smile too wide and his eyes too eager. That must be Cyrus Hoffman, her intended. But before he could reach her, another figure moved from the shadows near the depot building. This man was younger, broader through the shoulders, with dark hair beneath his hat and eyes the color of winter storm clouds. He said nothing, but his gaze met hers with an intensity that made her forget the cold wind cutting through her thin coat. Something passed between them in that moment, swift and unexpected as lightning. Recognition without introduction. Safety without promises. As if he had been waiting not just for the train, but specifically for her. Cyrus Hoffman reached her first, his gloved hand extended and his weathered face creased with satisfaction. "You must be Miss Ashworth," he said, his voice carrying across the platform loud enough for every man present to hear. "I am Cyrus Hoffman. We have business to discuss." The word business made her stomach clench. She had hoped for kindness, perhaps even courtesy, but his tone suggested she was no different from the cattle he likely purchased at market. Around them, the other men began to disperse, their curiosity satisfied now that the entertainment had been claimed. But the dark-haired stranger had not moved. He stood perfectly still beside the depot wall, his storm-gray eyes fixed not on Cyrus but on her face, as if reading something there that others could not see. When Cyrus grasped her elbow to guide her toward his waiting wagon, the stranger took one deliberate step forward. "Easy there, Hoffman," the younger man said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge sharp as January ice. "The lady just stepped off a long journey. Maybe give her a moment to catch her breath." Cyrus turned, his grip tightening on Cordelia's arm. "This is none of your concern, Thornfield. The arrangements have been made." Ezra Thornfield. So that was his name. Cordelia found herself studying his face, noting the way his jaw tightened when Cyrus's fingers pressed deeper into her sleeve. There was something protective in his stance, like a man preparing to defend what belonged to him, though they had never spoken a word. "The arrangements," Ezra repeated slowly, and there was something dangerous in the way he said it. "What arrangements would those be, exactly? Because from where I stand, it looks like you are handling a lady with less courtesy than you would show a horse." The winter wind picked up, sending snow devils swirling between them, but neither man looked away from the other. Cordelia stood caught between them, aware that something far more significant than simple politeness was being decided in this moment. Cyrus released her arm so abruptly that Cordelia stumbled backward a step. His face had gone red above his silver beard, whether from anger or embarrassment she could not tell. "You forget yourself, Thornfield," he said through gritted teeth. "The lady came here to fulfill a contract." "Did she now?" Ezra said, and his attention shifted to Cordelia with surprising gentleness. His eyes held a question rather than an assumption. "Is that what you came here for, Miss Ashworth? To fulfill a contract?" The simple act of being asked rather than told what she wanted nearly undid her composure. No one had inquired about her wishes in months, not since the scandal that had destroyed her reputation and left her with no choice but to flee Boston. Her throat tightened, but she managed to speak. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go," she said quietly. Something flickered in Ezra's expression, a recognition that went deeper than sympathy. He understood what it meant to have no choices left, she realized. He had stood in that same desperate place where pride became a luxury no one could afford. "Well then," he said, his voice gentle as snowfall, "that is an honest answer. More honest than most folks manage." He touched the brim of his hat in her direction. "My name is Ezra Thornfield, Miss Ashworth. I run a small ranch about 5 miles north of town. Cyrus stepped forward again, his jaw working with barely controlled anger. She is not available for other offers, Thornfield. The arrangements have been made and payment sent. Payment? Ezra repeated, and now there was no mistaking the ice in his tone. You paid for her passage, did you? That makes her your property. Does it? The question hung in the frigid air like a challenge. Around them, the depot had grown quiet except for the hiss of steam from the cooling locomotive. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Cyrus's answer. Cyrus's face had gone from red to purple, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. She is my intended wife, he said, each word sharp as breaking ice. The contract is legal and binding. Is it now? Ezra said, and turned his full attention to Cordelia. His storm-gray eyes held steady on hers, patient as winter itself. Miss Ashworth, did you sign any papers? Make any promises beyond agreeing to come west and consider the arrangement? Cordelia felt the weight of both men's stares, but it was Ezra's calm presence that gave her courage to speak the truth. No, she said quietly. I only agreed to travel here and meet Mr. Hoffman. Nothing more was promised. The words seemed to settle between them like fresh snow, muffling the harshness of the moment. Ezra nodded once, as if her answer confirmed something he had already suspected. Then it seems the lady is free to choose her own path, he said to Cyrus. She has nowhere else to go, Cyrus snapped. No money, no connections. What choice does she have? Ezra stepped closer to Cordelia, close enough that she could smell leather and wood smoke on his coat, close enough to see the kindness that lived behind his steady gaze. She has whatever choices she wants to make, he said simply, and I would be honored to help her make them, if she would accept my assistance. The offer hung between them, precious as firelight in darkness. Cordelia had grown so accustomed to having her decisions made for her future bartered away by others, that the simple gift of choice felt overwhelming. Ezra was offering her something she had thought lost forever, the right to decide her own fate. I would be grateful for your help, Mr. Thornfield, she heard herself say, the words surprising her with their steadiness. Ezra smiled then, the first real warmth she had seen since stepping off that train. Cyrus stood frozen for a long moment, his mouth working soundlessly like a fish pulled from water. Then his face twisted with rage and something uglier. You will regret this, he said to Cordelia, his voice low and venomous. Both of you will regret this. A woman like you has no business being particular about her circumstances. Ezra moved then, faster than Cordelia would have thought possible for such a large man. He placed himself between her and Cyrus, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. I think you have said enough, Hoffman, he said quietly. The lady has made her choice. Time for you to respect it. The threat was delivered so calmly it took a moment for its full weight to settle. Cyrus looked from Ezra's steady face to his hand on the weapon, and whatever he saw there made him step backward. This is not over, he muttered, but he was already turning away, stalking toward his wagon with the stiff-legged gait of a man whose pride had been publicly trampled. Ezra waited until Cyrus had driven away before turning back to Cordelia. His hand moved away from his gun as if it had never been there, and his expression gentled. I am sorry you had to witness that unpleasantness, Miss Ashworth. Some men forget that being disappointed does not give them the right to be cruel. The simple acknowledgement of Cyrus's cruelty, the validation that her instincts had been correct, made Cordelia's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She had grown so used to being told her feelings did not matter. Her fears were unfounded. Her discomfort was selfishness. Thank you, she managed to say, for standing up for me. I cannot remember the last time someone did that. Ezra's smile was gentle as morning light. Every person deserves someone to stand up for them, Miss Ashworth. That includes you. The wind had grown sharper while they stood talking, and Cordelia pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. The gesture did not escape Ezra's notice. His eyes took in her inadequate clothing, her worn carpetbag, the way she shivered despite trying to hide it. You must be frozen clear through, he said. And hungry too, I would guess. The dining car on that train serves food that would shame a prison cook. He picked up her carpetbag before she could protest, handling it with the same careful respect he had shown her. My wagon is just there. Let me take you somewhere warm where we can talk properly about what comes next. Cordelia hesitated, not from fear but from the strangeness of being offered genuine care without conditions attached. In Boston, every kindness had come with expectations, Every gesture of help had required payment in obedience or gratitude or silence. But Ezra's offer felt different, as clean and honest as fresh snow. "Where would you take me?" she asked. "To my ranch, if you are comfortable with that. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, lives there too. She is a fine woman, came west from San Francisco with her late husband. She would be glad for another woman's company, and I think you would like her. If that does not suit you, I can arrange a room at the boarding house in town." The fact that he offered alternatives, that he had thought to mention his housekeeper's presence, that he gave her choices instead of simply deciding for her, made Cordelia's chest tighten with something dangerously close to hope. "Your ranch sounds lovely," she said softly. Ezra helped her up into the wagon seat with gentle hands, then climbed up beside her. As they rolled away from the depot, he tucked a thick woolen blanket around her shoulders without asking permission, as natural as breathing. The simple kindness of it made tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The wagon rolled through snow-covered countryside that stretched endlessly under a pewter sky. Cordelia had never seen so much open space, so much silence broken only by the creak of wheels and the soft snorting of Ezra's horses. The vastness should have felt lonely, but wrapped in his woolen blanket with his steady presence beside her, she felt safer than she had in months. "Tell me about Boston," Ezra said as they crested a small hill. "What was your life like there?" The question was asked without prying curiosity, simply an invitation to share what she chose to share. Cordelia found herself speaking more freely than she had expected. "I taught school," she said. 23 children in a one-room schoolhouse near the harbor. I loved watching their faces when they finally understood a difficult lesson, the way they would light up with discovery. "You must have been a fine teacher," Ezra said. "Children know when someone truly cares about them. They can sense it the way animals sense weather." His understanding of what had mattered to her, his recognition that teaching had been more than just work, touched something deep in her chest. No one in Boston had ever acknowledged the love she had poured into those lessons, the pride she had taken in her students' accomplishments. "What made you leave?" he asked gently. Cordelia was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow-laden pine trees pass by. "There was a scandal," she said finally. "Not of my making, but I was caught in the middle of it. A married man in town decided he wanted more from me than I was willing to give. When I refused his advances, he spread rumors about my character to protect his own reputation." Ezra's hands tightened on the reins, and she saw his jaw clench. "A coward then," he said quietly. "Only a coward destroys an innocent woman to save himself." The ranch appeared through the falling snow like something from a dream, its log buildings sturdy and welcoming against the white landscape. Smoke curled from the chimney of the main house, promising warmth within, and Cordelia could see the golden glow of lamplight through frost-covered windows. It looked like home in a way that made her chest ache with longing. As Ezra helped her down from the wagon, the front door opened and a small woman emerged onto the covered porch. She was perhaps 50 years old, with graying black hair pinned back neatly and kind eyes that took in Cordelia's appearance with immediate understanding rather than judgment. "Mrs. Chun," Ezra called out, "this is Miss Ashworth. She has had a difficult day and could use some of your famous hospitality." The older woman hurried forward, her face creased with concern. Of course. Come inside, dear. You look half frozen. I have soup on the stove and fresh bread in the oven." As they walked toward the house, Mrs. Chun slipped her arm through Cordelia's with natural warmth. "I came west as a mail-order bride myself 23 years ago," she said quietly. "Takes courage to leave everything behind and start over. You are among friends here." The simple statement, delivered without pity or curiosity, nearly undid Cordelia's careful composure. Someone understood. Someone knew what it felt like to be desperate enough to trust your future to strangers, to gamble everything on the hope that kindness might exist somewhere in the world. Inside the house, warmth enveloped them like an embrace. The main room was simply furnished but comfortable, with hand-sewn quilts draped over wooden chairs and shelves lined with well-worn books. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Mrs. Chun bustled around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, ladling thick beef soup into a wooden bowl and cutting generous slices from a loaf of bread that filled the air with the scent of yeast and comfort. Sit," she commanded gently, guiding Cordelia to a chair near the fire. "You need food and warmth before anything else." Ezra hung his coat by the door and moved to tend the fire, adding another log that sent sparks dancing up the chimney. The domesticity of the scene, the easy way he and Mrs. Chun moved around each other in the shared space, spoke of years of mutual respect and genuine affection. This was not a house where women were treated as servants or burdens. When Cordelia took her first spoonful of soup, the rich flavor and warmth spreading through her body nearly brought tears to her eyes. She could not remember the last time someone had fed her with such care, without expectation or demand for gratitude. Mrs. Chun watched her eat with satisfaction, refilling her bowl before it was half empty. "My husband and I came here with nothing but hope and determination," Mrs. Chun said, settling into the chair across from Cordelia with her own cup of tea. "Mr. Thornfield gave us work when others would not, saw our worth when others saw only foreigners to be mistrusted. Now this ranch is as much our home as his." Ezra looked up from the fire, his face serious in the flickering light. "Everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth," he said simply. "Everyone deserves to be judged by their character rather than their circumstances." The words settled around Cordelia like the warmth of the fire, seeping into places that had been cold for so long she had forgotten they existed. Here was a man who practiced what he preached, who had built his household on principles of dignity and respect rather than power and control. After the meal, Mrs. Chun showed Cordelia to a small but comfortable room at the back of the house. Clean quilts covered the narrow bed, and a washstand held a basin and pitcher decorated with painted roses. A window looked out over snow-covered pastures where cattle huddled together against the cold. "This was my daughter's room," Mrs. Chun said softly, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from the quilt. "She married a good man in Denver last spring. I have been hoping someone would need it again, someone who would appreciate its peace and quiet." The simple gift of privacy, of a space that belonged to her alone even temporarily, overwhelmed Cordelia with gratitude. She had grown so accustomed to existing at the sufferance of others, sleeping in borrowed beds with borrowed blankets, never knowing how long her welcome would last. When Mrs. Chun left her alone to rest, Cordelia sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the vast Montana sky. The snow had stopped falling, and stars were beginning to appear through breaks in the clouds. She had traveled so far from everything familiar, yet for the first time in months she did not feel lost. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Ezra standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands and uncertainty in his storm-gray eyes. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed," he said quietly, "and to tell you that there is no rush to decide what comes next. You are welcome here as long as you need shelter and time to think." His consideration for her need to process everything that had happened, his understanding that she required time to heal from the wounds Boston had left on her spirit, touched something deep in her heart. In all her life, no one had ever offered her time without expectations attached. 3 days passed in quiet healing. Cordelia helped Mrs. Chun with cooking and mending, finding comfort in simple tasks that required only her hands and not her heart. Ezra was respectfully distant, checking on her needs but never pressing for conversation or decisions. His patience felt like a gift she had never received before. On the 4th morning, she found him in the barn tending to a mare who had injured her leg. His hands moved gently over the animal's fetlock, murmuring soft words of reassurance as he cleaned the wound. The sight of such a large, strong man showing such tender care made something shift inside her chest. "She is lucky to have you looking after her," Cordelia said from the barn doorway. Ezra looked up, his face brightening at the sound of her voice. "She is a good horse who ran into bad luck," he said simply. "Sometimes that is all the difference between thriving and suffering. A little care and patience." Cordelia understood that he was speaking about more than the mare. She stepped closer, drawn by the quiet strength in his movements, the way he never rushed or demanded but simply offered what was needed. "Why did you help me that day at the depot?" she asked. "You did not know me. You owed me nothing." Ezra's hands stilled on the mare's leg, and he was quiet for a long moment. "When I was younger, I made some mistakes that cost me everything I thought mattered," he said finally. "I learned what it felt like to have the whole world decide you were not worth their kindness. I would not wish that feeling on anyone." His honesty, the pain she heard beneath his careful words, made her step closer still. "We both know what it means to be judged unfairly," she said softly. When he looked up at her then, she saw recognition pass between them, deeper than attraction or gratitude. They were kindred spirits, two wounded souls who understood the value of second chances. Spring came early to Montana that year, melting the snow in rushing streams and bringing the first green shoots of new grass to the pastures. Cordelia stood in the doorway of what had become her home, watching Ezra work with the horses in the corral. 6 months had passed since that frozen day at the depot, 6 months of learning what it meant to be valued rather than merely tolerated. He had never pressed her for promises or declarations. Instead, he had shown her through countless small kindnesses that love was not something to be bargained for or earned through suffering. It was simply offered, as freely as sunlight or rain, to be accepted when the heart was ready. When he noticed her watching, he smiled and walked over, his eyes warm with the affection that had grown between them like wildflowers after winter. The town still talked, Mrs. Chun had reported, but their gossip had turned from scandal to admiration. The strange mail-order bride who had chosen the half-breed rancher over respectable Cyrus Hoffman had proven herself through grace and quiet strength. "I have been thinking," Cordelia said as he reached her, "about what you said that first day. About everyone deserving someone to stand up for them." Ezra stopped before her, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the laugh lines around his storm-gray eyes. "And what conclusion have you reached?" he asked gently. "That I would like to stand up for you too," she said. "For as long as you will have me." His smile then was like sunrise after the longest night. "I was hoping you might say that," he said, and reached for her hands with the same gentle patience he had shown from the very beginning. "Mine," he said softly, not as a claim of ownership but as a promise of belonging. Have you ever found belonging in unexpected places? Tell us about your moment of acceptance in the comments below.